Hello there, and welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash, and I'm your host on this journey through men's style, self-development, and personal grooming. Now, today's topic for conversation could be seen by many to be something of a somber thing to talk about on a channel like this. But the reality is that at some point, all of us will have to deal with the inevitable situation of the death of somebody that we know. And how we deal with that, how we cope with that, will have a profound effect on the relatives of the person who has died, but also on ourselves as well. We all want to do the right thing in a situation which is laced with such emotion and trauma. So today I'm going to talk about how to deal with death for a gentleman. Now, the reason I wanted to address this unusual topic today is because I think we live in a society where death is largely placed out of sight. You know, nobody likes to face the prospect of their own death, of course, or the unpleasantness of dealing with the death of a loved one. And as a result, many of us feel uncomfortable when we're around people or we're facing a situation where somebody that we know has tragically died. So I thought I would give you some tips of how I have come to deal with this situation. Now, you might think to yourself, well, what does this guy know about death? Well, the fact is, I've had something of a grandstand view of many tragic deaths. As some of you may know, I spent nearly 25 years working in law enforcement here in the United Kingdom. And over that period of time, there were many jobs which I performed in which dealing with death, often sudden and unexpected death, was a daily part of my normal activities. So, as I say, I had a bit of a grandstand view to the way that people coped with death, and obviously I had to deal with it myself pretty much on a weekly basis, if nothing else. So I thought some of the tips that I've picked up, the way that one should act with decorum and dignity, might be useful to you when you deal with the death of somebody in your associate circle. I think that the most important thing to do when you hear of the death of somebody in your circle of friends or associates is to get in touch with their family. Now, how you undertake that depends on your level of closeness to that person and the family. If there's somebody perhaps that you work alongside, an associate or a colleague, I think it's most appropriate to send a note of condolence. I would always recommend sending a handwritten note, perhaps in conjunction with a bereavement card. Handwritten because I think this implies personal contact. You know, sending an email or sending some other form of electronic communication, I think lacks that intimacy. The written word on a sheet of paper or a card means so much more. In a time where, you know, everybody communicates electronically, the written word, your handwriting, can have a personal expression to the person that you're communicating with. And it can mean so much more. It's there for them to look at, to touch, and to feel and to hold. And it's a connection with that person between you and them, which can never be replaced by a text or an email. However, if you are of perhaps a younger generation and the only way that you've ever communicated with the people that we're talking about here, the relatives of the deceased person, perhaps, you know, the email or the text may be the most appropriate. I would leave that for you to weigh up. But in my case, I would always seek to send a handwritten note or a bereavement card because I think it means so much more than an email. Either way, however you get in touch with the bereaved family, I think it's really important to choose your words very carefully. Their meaning will be important to the people who read it. So I would avoid cliches of comments like, you know, I know exactly how you feel. You don't, of course. Nobody understands the loss and bereavement that another person feels. It is unique to them and entirely individual. So even though you might have suffered a recent bereavement of a similar nature yourself, it can not land correctly if you're saying these generalizations like, I understand how you must feel. So keep it to simple words like, you know, at this terrible time, me and my family are thinking of you and your loss. A really important thing that you can do with this communication is to let them know that you're there to support them. Remember, this is a time in somebody's life where their world is turned upside down and everything which used to be normal is now at an end. And you can help. You know, if you are, when you're writing that note of condolence, when you're getting in touch, you can offer actual support based on their situation. So if you know, for instance, that your friend, maybe perhaps a parent has died, so they're going to have to go and live with their surviving parent to sort out the funeral arrangements and help them overcome their grief. Whilst they're away, you know, they might need to have their dog walked or their cat fed. This is where you can offer actual, genuine support to that person. Tell them, you know, I understand you're going to be away looking after your mother or father. Perhaps I can come in and feed Felix the cat, or take Rover for a walk, or whatever you need. Rover can come and stay with me for the weekend, or however long you need to get the situation sorted. It's little touches like that which will make the world of difference and will stick in the memory of the person who is going through absolute turmoil in their lives. Now, if the person who has sadly died is a bit closer to us than an associate or perhaps a workmate, maybe they're an intimate friend, or maybe they're a member of your extended family. This is where a letter of condolence or maybe an email isn't going to cut it. This is where we get a bit more personal. We want to speak to them. Now, if they live some distance away, maybe the telephone is the only route that you can take, or a FaceTime or a Zoom meeting. Whatever you can do to get to see them so that you can express, you know, your sadness and offer your support. But if they live close by, maybe you can call upon them and visit and tell them, you know, how sad you are, and perhaps offer any efforts you can to help their journey through this terrible part of their lives. But whatever you do, always be led by the wishes of the family. Maybe when you're told of the death of this person, you might get the message, you know, the family would like to be left alone to grieve through this terrible time. This is not a moment for you to decide that you want to doorstep the family and push your condolences on them. If they want time to be alone on their own and to think about their situation, the last thing they need is you going around there. But if they do invite visitors, please do go along and express your condolences and offer that support. That's the important thing. It can really help. Now, when there's a death, it's naturally followed by a funeral or some form of service which will memorialize the life of the person who has sadly died and allow the family and friends to come together to share their thoughts and their grief. Regardless of your religious direction, there's generally something of this nature which marks the passing of somebody into the next plane of their existence, or whatever you believe. So the funeral is the next point. You will really have time to think about how you're going to conduct yourself, and you've guessed it, how you're going to dress. This is an important thing. So generally speaking, for a gentleman attending the funeral of somebody that we know, it's quite easy, actually. That this is where the dress code is something which you don't want to deviate from. A funeral is pretty set in stone. It's pretty easy to understand. In the Western world, we tend to wear dark clothes to express the somberness and the sadness of the occasion. For most men, a dark coloured suit with a white shirt and a black tie, that's all you need to know. Now, you may not have a black suit. Very few people should have a black suit. It's a very non-versatile garment for your wardrobe. I would never recommend people invest in a black suit unless you're a waiter or something like that. You may have a charcoal grey suit, or maybe even a lighter grey suit. As long as you wear a black tie and the other accessories that you wear, like your shoes are black, your belt is black, it'll give all of the right signals. What we're trying to do is show our sort of commitment to the group, and in a funeral, by dressing in black, it's the way that we do that. If it's going to be an outdoor event, if you're going to be standing at the side of a grave, maybe a long overcoat. I'm wearing a black overcoat today, may be appropriate. If you're of a certain age and you're a person who likes to do so, headdress. You know, I think that a bowler hat is entirely appropriate for a funeral. Equally, any dark coloured hat might suit that purpose too. As I say, this is not a time to express your individuality and your character, all right? So we're not going to be wearing garish coloured pocket squares or anything like that. If you want to wear a pocket square, a simple white square in a straight fold is all that you'll need to wear. And please, please do not succumb to the Hollywood fashion of wearing sunglasses to a funeral, right? To show, or not to show your emotions. It looks cheap, it looks vulgar, it is not the thing to do at a funeral. Funerals are meant to be emotional, they're meant to be somber. There's no place for the sunglasses in a funeral anymore. And remember, look your smartest, right? A funeral is just about the most formal occasion that most people will encounter in their lives. And it's very important. Look smart. Polish your shoes. Make sure your shirt is ironed, that you've had a haircut, that you have a shave. Do all the grooming, all right? It might not be a happy occasion, but it's the last thing that you can do to show your respect for the person that you knew who has died and will no longer be with you. Imagine that they're looking down and you want them to see you looking pin sharp and as good as you can be. So if you need any other motivation to shine those shoes and iron those trousers, think of that. When it comes to the funeral service itself, this is a time to show your absolute respect. Make sure you're there on time. And when I say on time, I mean 10 minutes beforehand. So you've got plenty of time to park, there's no confusion, you know exactly what you're doing. You want to get into the room where the service is taking place and find yourself a seat, all right? Obviously, the family will be sat near the front or at the front. So if you're very close to the family and you think you can offer support just by being close to them, sit as close to them as you can. Seeing your face may make the world of difference to how they get through the service. If you're looking after young children, maybe even a baby, sit at the back, so that if the child starts crying, you can easily slip out of the room and not disrupt the service. If by some chance you turn up late, do not enter halfway through the service. Wait until it's all over and join the mourners at the end. Can you imagine the embarrassment of walking into a service for a funeral halfway through and everybody in the room turns to look at you? It's not worth it. Just wait outside and then, join the mourners afterwards. Now, regardless of your own personal religious affiliations, respect whatever's taking place in that service. If there is the singing of hymns to be undertaken, do sing along, get involved. It's nothing worse than being somewhere where there's just mumbled silence in a service. The hymns will have been chosen by the family and they'll have specific relevance to them, maybe to the person who's died. So the least you can do is offer a bit of support and get behind the singing. It doesn't matter if you don't agree with it. This is not about you. This is about your support and your respect for somebody else. So get involved. Break out the lungs. Now, after the service, be sure to stick around for a while and speak to some of the other mourners and certainly speak to the family and again convey your sadness and condolence to them and make sure they know who you are, because if you perhaps worked with the person who has died, you might never have met their family. So when you go up to them and speak to them, to make sure there's no errors of communication, tell them, my name is Ash. I knew David very well. I worked with him for 5 years. We always shared lunch together in the canteen. He was such a funny and lovely man. I'm so sorry about your loss, and if there's anything I can ever do, please let me know. Something as simple as that, just a few sentences, expresses so much to the loved ones of the person who is gone. They know that you worked with him, you had great times together, and you thought the world of them. It's very comforting, and that's what we're trying to do here. Comfort the family of somebody who sadly departed. Now, it's quite common after a funeral for there to be some sort of gathering, a wake, where the family and other mourners will come together normally to think about the person who has died, have some refreshments, particularly for those who have travelled a long distance to get to the funeral, and it's just a moment to spend some time together. If you're invited to the wake, if you're a member of that close circle of friends who've been asked to attend, make sure that you do so. I know it can be a daunting prospect, all right, to go to a wake where it's all sadness and doom and gloom, and try and get through that hour or two that you're there. You know, it can be something which isn't an exciting prospect, but it's really important to the family to know that the people who knew the person who has died want to come along and support them. So go along, do your bit, all right? Try and express your sadness, but you know, focus upon the positivity, the good times rather than the sad times. If you haven't been invited to the wake, this is not a party that you should doorstep or gate crash, because basically, you know, they tend to be quite intimate, personal things. If you've not been invited, stay away. And if you are invited to the wake, generally speaking, I think you'll find that alcohol is offered to people who attend the wake. It's part of that whole refreshment process. I would advise against drinking too much, all right? Obviously, it's a sad time, and alcohol can take the edge off one's emotions. That's often why many people drink. So if you drink a little bit too much, these can turn into emotional car crashes with wailing and tears and sobbing, whilst other people will want to get up on the tables and chairs singing and dancing. Believe me, I remember vividly going to a wake many years ago where an associate of mine, somebody I worked with in the military, had died somewhat unexpectedly, and I went to his funeral, and I remember the wake. He was a Scottish gentleman. The funeral was in Scotland, and I was unaccustomed to the Scottish approach to sending off the departed, and there was a huge amount of heavy drinking and screaming and laughter, wailing and sobbing, all combined into one. It was quite a traumatic experience for somebody unexpected to see that. But when you go to these wakes, you know, be prepared. Take the lead from the family. It's how they wish to set the tempo. If for them it's an incredibly emotional and sad situation, you know, play along with that. If they want to be upbeat and cheerful and focus upon the great achievements of their loved one's life, go along with that as well. There's no wrong answer here, but for goodness sake, you know, take it easy on the booze. Have the glass of sherry that you're offered. Do not have 10 pints of beer, all right? It's not going to end well if you drink too much. And don't forget, your support can be ongoing, because, you know, it doesn't end with the funeral. For the family who've lost someone, you know, their lives will never be the same again, particularly in the first few years after a death, where the loss of their loved one is most keenly felt, particularly at birthdays, Christmases, or whatever significant elements of the year are important to them. So it might be an idea for you to show your support by dropping them a handwritten note of condolence or remembrance on the birthday of the person who has died, if you knew them well enough to know their birthday, of course, or other situations like that, just to let them know that you are thinking about them. As I say, simple little acts like that will mean the world of difference to people, and that's how you can help other people navigate their terrible journey through the loss of somebody that they've loved. Well folks, I hope this video has been of some use to you, and at some point it may be beneficial when somebody you know or somebody on your circle of associates comes to the end of their time, and you can do your little bit to help their family and show your respect for them. If you have enjoyed the video, I would encourage you to give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you like this sort of material, and if you'd like to help the channel more practically, you can buy me a coffee. The link to the Chap's Guide Buy Me a Coffee page is down in the show notes below. If you pop along there, I would be delighted to share a coffee with you. So, until the next time, I sincerely hope you don't have to put in place any of the advice and tips that I've offered today, but if they do, you will be forearmed. So until the next time, take care of yourselves, and I will see you again very soon.